Welcome to all our participants to this high-level event on the leading role of regions for raising ambitions on climate adaptation and resilience on the occasion of COP26, organized by Regions4. This event is organized by the regional governments of the Basque Country, Congope, Ecuador, Sao Paulo, Mancomunidad Regional de los Andes, Scotland, Lombardy, Catalonia, and Flanders. Could I request that the speakers just mute themselves, please? The partners are the Race to Resilience, Basque Center for Climate Change, Orufagor, European Committee of Regions, Assembly of European Regions, local governments and municipal authorities, constituencies, CDP, Climate, CIC, World Resources Institute. We recognize extra funding support from the government of Flanders and Catalonia. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be your dedicated moderator for this event. My name is Susan Chomba. I'm the Director of Vital Landscapes at World Resources Institute and a global ambassador for the Race to Resilience under the UN High-Level Champions on Climate Change. Welcome to our distinguished speakers and panelists. We have speakers and panelists joining us remotely from all over the world, but also speakers joining us from the multi-level pavilion at COP26 in Glasgow. On logistics, please note interpretation is provided for those joining the Zoom link in English, French, and Spanish. And for people who registered through Zoom, you can look at the bottom of the screen for the interpretation option and click on your preferred language. This event is one of the many events organized by regional governments with the COP focusing on climate adaptation and resilience, and is a direct contribution from regional governments to the Race to Resilience campaign by showcasing the commitments of regions to the climate agenda on resilience. Regions Adapt, a Regions4 flagship initiative, has pledged to support its 76 strong member regions to commit to the Race to Resilience campaign and to develop, implement, and report climate and resilience actions. This event will present some of the key actions undertaken by regional governments in doing so. We will also launch the COP26 statement by regional governments and Regions4 COP26 report. The report compiles good practices and lessons learned from regional governments within the past 5 years under the Regions Adapt initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, we know by now that the world is at crossroads. The latest IPCC report leaves no room for doubt. It is unequivocal that climate change is driving unprecedented changes that are already affecting all regions of the world. These changes are widespread, rapid, and intensifying, and some trends are now irreversible. This decade is the most pivotal period that we have to reach climate neutrality and the emission reduction targets adopted in the Paris Agreement. Adapting to change is no longer an option, and it demands unprecedented acceleration and investment in adaptation and building resilience. This is why this COP26 must be a turning point for the world leaders to come together before the ability to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is out of reach. The newly NDC synthesis report updated this week underscores that the current 192 nationally determined contributions would lead to 16% increase by 2030, or a temperature of 2.7 degrees by 2100. COP26, therefore, is a critical moment to accelerate global action, raise ambitions in this crucial decade, and unlock the full potential of subnational governments as key actors of the transformative change we need. In this event, therefore, we have the privilege to welcome more than 11 leading regions from around the world to share from a rich diversity of perspectives and contexts how regions are ready to meet the challenge and to raise the bar for ambitious climate action. We have 3 key agenda items: a segment of high-level remarks on regional governments' leadership on adaptation and resilience, a panel discussion on regional governments' perspectives and recommendations to accelerate climate adaptation and build resilience, and the third agenda will be a segment of concluding remarks on ensuring COP26 delivers on the ambitions with contributions and aspirations of regional governments at the fore. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now turn to 3 key speakers that will highlight the leadership role of regional governments on adaptation and resilience. Each speaker has got 4 to 5 minutes. Our first speaker is Mr. Gonzalo Munoz, the UN High-Level Climate Champion from Chile, a business entrepreneur and social change maker at the forefront of environmental innovation in Chile, who reinvented the country's recycling industry to usher in a future without waste. He is joining us from COP Multi-Level Action Pavilion Room. Mr. Gonzalo Munoz, very, very pleased to welcome you. And I have a question for you,
Thanks
Mr.
so much.
Gonzalo.
Oops.
Great, please.
Thank you. Thanks so much, dear Susan. First, I want to thank Regions 4 and the leadership of the Region 4 Secretary General, Natalia Uribe. Thanks so much for everything that you're doing, including how active you are in social media on positioning what it means in terms of elevating the conversation and moving forward. And all of the whole team in Regions 4 who have been fantastic partners for the high-level champions. So I'm speaking on behalf of both Nigel and I and our broader team. I want to give a special thank to Susan. I was telling Natalia that I've been to many panels where many people are connecting virtually. That is amazing. We've had a lot of capacity on making this COP much more inclusive in that sense. But this is the first time that the moderator, at least for me, the moderator is joining virtually. So that reflects not only that Susan is a real ambassador for Race to Zero and Race to Resilience, being in the Day of Resilience, that sends the right type of resilient spirit, right, joining virtually. So thanks so much. And as you can imagine, Susan, we're missing you in person. Look forward for meeting you as soon as possible. And of course, to the government of Scotland and Lombardy region for the leadership on adaptation and resilience. We know that it's all about now moving from negotiation to action and implementation. That's what we're here for. And COP26 has shown us how we can identify the leaders that are delivering the action that we need today, and call upon other actors to do the same. In that sense, regional governments are absolutely doing that. They're not only, let's say, talking the talk, they're walking the talk. Honestly, you're running the talk, and even competing in the most fantastic way. We love that when we're seeing from Scotland mostly like saying, now we're going to push for even higher ambition and expecting that others will follow. Regions 4 are supporting regions for all around the world in stepping up their commitments to develop, implement, report, and improve the impacts of their resilient action and adaptation plans. And this is the leadership that COP26 is crying out for. And I would say COP26 is an example of what citizens from all around the world are crying out for. We have very concrete future action for the Marrakesh Partnership and the role of the champions that we expect that will be very well reflected in the leadership that regional actors have. For example, today we launched one new Alliance for Climate Action, in this case in Chile, my whole country, so proud of that. But you can see how in many places, the ACAs, like for example, we've seen in Japan, I saw ICLEI people here around, but we're seeing that in Australia, we're seeing that in Brazil. Daniel Hilary was there, but also some people here in Brazil are representing the capacity of the regions to really push for higher ambition. That's what the ambition loop is about. We understand that it's hard to have all, let's say, all national governments fully aligned. They already signed the Paris Agreement, and then some of them are being more progressive than others. When it comes to some national governments that are not necessarily doing what we expect, well, it comes for the regional government to do the work and push for higher ambition and move faster and forward. We will have an important upcoming COP26 action day on the 11th around cities, regions, and built environment. And we'll talk about the next steps for climate champions after this COP. And we will have there First Minister Nicola Sturgeon in the plenary sharing her thoughts in representation of many other, let's say, regions of the world, because this is your time. The momentum is growing. Regions4 is championing the cause of adaptation and resilience. It's the sign of the effort that is required and that the effort is working. And mostly our message of as champions to the region is investing in adaptation and resilience is just not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. So join Regions4 and collaborate with the regions already leading. This is the moment to send the message that there is not only sense of urgency when it comes to the regions, but the sense of urgency with integrity and accountability that the citizens of the world require. Honestly, I've had like probably thousands, not millions of, or hundreds of thousands of conversations with people that are expecting the sense of urgency, but also the accountability. I have heard anyone doubting on the capacity of the regions and the subnational government to really implement the Paris Agreement in the very and most integral way. So I'm sure that you do have the capacity of not only fulfill the Paris Agreement, but also push for higher ambition globally. That's the role that you have today. No one, I said, no government should be left behind in this trajectory. We expect that on Thursday, we will see a massive number of announcements and commitments of how much the regions are now connected to the trajectory of the 1.5 resilient world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gonzalo, Munoz. Those were excellent and very inspiring remarks and recognition of the pivotal role that the region governments play in helping us accelerate our climate ambitions. Our second speaker is Honorable Mrs. Arencia Tapia, Regions4 President and Minister for Economic Development, Sustainability and Environment of the Basque Government, Spain, also joining us from the COP Pavilion. Please, Mrs. Arencia. And for Mrs. Arencia, could you please just expound to us, how are regions like the Basque Country leading in raising ambitions for adaptation?
It's a pleasure for me to be here with you, really. And in my capacity as a region president, Regions4 President, and representative of the Basque government. It's time to give a voice to a broad global community of regional governments who work every day for the sustainable development of our territories and for the resilient future of our planet. It's a pleasure to share this panel with key allies of our work, as we have had now Mr. Munoz, who has had to leave. And we have here with us the Scottish Minister, Mrs. Mccollum. And without doubt, the collective work of non-state actors is making a difference nowadays. And it's proof of that this multi-level action pavilion, where we are today, is the first in the story of the COP, the climate COP system. At this COP26, we regional governments represent 50% of the world economy, with local and regional governments implementing more than 70% of the climate change mitigation measures and up to 90% of the adaptation measures. So our constituency has high expectations on this event and the negotiations that will take place this week. That is why we are once again putting our knowledge, our commitment, our tools at the disposal of the United Nations and its parties to achieve true multi-level climate governance, where all voices have place. That's the main reason that we have to work for. Through networks such as Regions4 and initiatives such as Regions Adapt and the Race to Resilience campaign, we will continue to make visible our key actions and the potentials of multi-level global collaboration. This is key to accelerate climate resilience. Faced with the growing threat of climate change, regional governments are leading and developing tailored solutions tailored to our territories, specific to them, which can be replicated all over the world. For instance, in the Basque Country, we have been working on climate action during the last years, and we are at a key moment now, as we are everybody in the world. We are drafting now an energy transition and climate change law, which in addition to regulating obligations related, of course, to mitigation and adaptation, will give legal status to the goal of ensuring resilience and climate change or climate neutrality to 2050. Since 2015, we have annually implemented a program named Climatec in Basque, in our language, which has allowed us to develop climate innovation projects. And finally, the multi-level governance model that we have built in the Basque Country, together with other administrations in collaboration with knowledge generating entities, have allowed us to launch a transformative project such as Urban Climate 2050. It was launched in 2019, and it has the aim to improve the urban environment to climate change in 6 years. Indeed, the leadership of regional governments can and should inspire ambitional national adaptation plans, of course, but commitments and actions also. By increasing solution-oriented collaboration between national and regional governments and localizing financial mechanisms for climate action, we will be able to plan more and better and improve the measurements of our effectiveness in reducing vulnerability in our territories in case of climate risks. By integrated climate adaptation into other global agendas and sectoral policies, such as those aimed at halting biodiversity, we will improve the conditions of the most vulnerable communities and ecosystems, and we will drive coherent and effective climate action. We have to work in every country, in every region, in order to develop these kind of actions. Today at COP26, Regions4 is presenting a brief report, a high-level event, this one, and a statement of regional governments that provide good practices, scientific evidence, and key recommendations to co-create and co-design a true transition to resilient economies and territories, leaving, of course, no one behind. So thank you very much for being here with us. And this is all for the moment.
Thank you so much, Honorable Arencia. That's really very, very important, underscoring the need for tailored solutions that can be scaled everywhere. Thank you so much. So our third speaker is Honorable Mrs. Mary Mccollum, Minister for Environment and Land Reform in Scotland, also joining us from COP Pavilion. And for you, Honorable Mary, looking at Scotland's expertise and experience, what is the specific role regional governments play to raise this bar? And from your point of view, what does success in COP26 look like? Mrs. Mary.
No, you can now. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to our chair. I'm very pleased to join this panel today with our distinguished guests and to welcome you to this event celebrating the leading role of states, regions and devolved governments like Scotland and our ambitions for driving climate resilience and adaptation. All of us who are gathered here are aware of the importance of this year's COP and the need, the very real need, to keep the Paris Agreement goal of limiting temperature rises to 1.5 degrees alive. And all of us are acutely aware of the impact that climate change is having right now. Of course, recent scientific reports have equally spoken to this, and those from UN bodies have confirmed that we will continue to see the impacts of climate change taking place and indeed accelerating. So all of this exemplifies why action on adaptation and resilience, it simply cannot wait, and why this COP must see governments not only commit to greater actions at home, but must also mobilize climate finance and recognize the need for joint working across nations, cities, businesses, all to deliver the transformative action that we know is required. Here in Scotland, we already know that, and we need to build resilience to the impacts of climate change that are already locked in here. In our 2019 adaptation programme, we set out over 170 policies and proposals to build that much needed resilience at home and to progress it in a way that is fair, which takes communities with us and which leaves no one behind. For example, we are investing substantial additional funds into flood risk management and coastal change adaptation over the next 5 years as part of our green recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And in July this year, we published a summary of our approach to adaptation in Scotland's indicative nationally determined contribution, the first time that we've done that. Crucially, we also recognise that our responsibility extends far beyond our own national borders, and a successful COP26, as I was asked to reflect upon, must look at ways in which we provide funds to address the damage caused by climate change, damage which in many instances cannot be adapted to and which often cannot be calculated economically, including up to and tragically loss of life. This must sit separate from and in addition to existing climate finance. That's why I'm really pleased that our First Minister last week announced that the Scottish Government's Climate Justice Fund will grant £1 million to the Climate Justice Resilience Fund. And this will help support the world's most vulnerable communities to deal with the loss and damage that they are already experiencing. £1 million is not a lot of money compared with what we will need, but we hope, being the first Western nation to commit this money, that others will soon follow suit. But still, more can and must be done, and COP26 must result in a global deal that raises ambition on adaptation alongside drastic action on mitigation. And central to this will be acknowledging what we're here to discuss today, that is that the multi-level action will be absolutely crucial. Not only will over 50% of the adaptation and mitigation measures needed to tackle climate change be implemented at subnational and local levels, but states, regions, and devolved governments are often closer to our communities, as has been reflected on. And the pace of change that we now need to move with means that we will have to engage very deeply with our communities to take them with us in this progress. COP26 must recognise that contribution, both in relation to mitigation and adaptation, and act as a catalyst that enables governments of all levels to maximise their potential in response to the urgent need for action. And the importance of multi-level action formed a central part of the discussion at a recent pre-COP event hosted by Lombardy in Scotland, where fellow states, regions, and devolved governments shared the actions that they are already taking and called for even greater ambition at COP26. These calls to action have, as my panelists have mentioned, now been compiled into a statement that we are launching this afternoon. It outlines some of the key outcomes subnational governments would like to see at COP26. And as we call for greater ambition and action from national governments, local governments must lead from the front. I'm very proud that Scotland is a member of the Race to Zero campaign, having set a target to achieve net zero emissions by 2045 and to have reduced our emissions by 75% by 2030, with annual targets in between, and a catch-up requirement where those targets are missed. Campaigns such as the Race to Zero campaign and the Regions Adapt initiative provide that important platform to demonstrate the leading actions that we're taking in mobilizing all actors, including national governments, to increase their ambitions. So I call on states, regions, and devolved governments to demonstrate their commitment to decisive climate action by joining us in these campaigns. I just want to thank Regions4 for bringing us all together today. I really hope that you enjoy the rest of the afternoon's discussions, and I would just conclude by reflecting on the fact that the scale of the challenge that we know that we all face means that we cannot work alone. We have to work across borders, we have to work across organizations, and the pace of change that we require means that it will be very important to work with our communities in the next 10 to 15 years. And I think that as regional and devolved governments, we are very well placed to do that. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Honorable Mairi Mccollum. That was a very, very strong call to action and to collaboration, and highlighting as well Scotland's leadership in terms of providing funds for justice, for climate justice. Totally appreciated. So I'd like to thank our high-level speakers. And from now, we are going to look at specific regional governments' perspectives, experiences, and recommendations to accelerate adaptation and build resilience. So first, we will hear the main recommendations and lessons that have been captured in Regions4 report for COP26 from Mrs. Natalia Uribe, Regions4 Secretary General. So Natalia, please, I'll ask you a question. So for the next speakers, kindly just give me a few seconds after I mention your name to pose the question. So for Mrs. Natalia, how has Regions4, through its flagship program, Regions Adapt, been able to increase ambitions from regional governments on adaptation and resilience? Mrs. Natalia, please.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yes. So good afternoon, everybody. And thank you so much for joining us today at this high-level event that Regions4 has organized with a number of regions and partners to show how regions are leading the change we want to see here at COP26. So regions are indeed taking leadership at the global stage through their capacity to influence, through their capacity to set example, to push for increased ambition, to inspire change at local, regional, and international levels. Regions are not only key non-state actors, but very importantly, non-state governments, and they are representing millions of citizens around the world. They are demonstrating bold leadership for the necessary transformations and developing strategic, innovative, collaborative, and scalable solutions to transition towards more resilient territories and economies. When we launched Regions Adapt in 2015 at the COP21 in Paris with the government of Catalonia and Rio de Janeiro, we did so with the conviction that adaptation needs to be higher on the global agenda, climate agenda, and also with the conviction that regions need to be duly recognized in their role and their important work on adaptation. So Regions Adapt became, in this way, the first global initiative to mobilize political engagement, to inspire and to support regional governments in developing strategies and plans, adaptation strategies and plans, to accelerate concrete and implement concrete adaptation actions, and to also, very importantly, transparently report on the progress made year after year. So during these past 5 years, we have witnessed and supported the development and implementation of over 50 adaptation plans from all world regions, with over 230 adaptation actions being implemented and reported on an annual basis. So since its launch, Regions Adapt has been promoting cooperation across regions and facilitating exchanges of good practices and learning opportunities, capacity building and implementation of joint projects. Through our collaborative work with the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action, the local group of municipal authorities, and the participation at COPs, we have been able to raise the visibility, the participation, the representation of regional governments in the climate agenda. Today, we are very happy we witness a growing Regions Adapt community of 76 regional governments, representing nearly 300 million citizens from all over the world, who are really building resilience to climate shocks and increasing adaptive capacity of their local communities. We now count with a reinforced strategy to help regions in raising their ambitions through a strengthened community of practice, peer-to-peer cooperation, technical partners, and directly contributing to the UNFCCC's Race to Resilience campaign. So some months ago, we were advocating for the creation of such a campaign when the Race to Zero was launched. And now we are really pleased to see not only that it exists, but that we are an official partner and bringing more regions to this global campaign as the time passes. So we have now looked back at these 5 years and captured what have been the lessons learned, what have been the contributions of regional governments, and we have compiled, and are very happy to launch here today this report that brings together concrete examples from 11 regional governments from the different regions to show how they are accelerating the ambitions. So this is just being launched today. You can access the publication at our Regions4 website. And I want to thank very much the collaboration with BC3, the Basque Center for Climate Change, in this joint publication, the Basque country and the government of Flanders, because it really shows how we move from commitment to delivering concrete actions. And what we have seen coming out of this report is really regions enhancing their ambitions in the sense that they are developing strategies that are increasingly more integrated and cross-sectoral and involving and engaging the different actors, local communities, private sector, and the academy. We have seen that they are progressively more targeted and inclusive of those being left behind, and increasingly more connected to the SDGs, to the Sustainable Development Goals, and to other key agendas, such as the biodiversity agenda. Regions are proving to be a strategic link between the national and the local levels of government, ensuring vertical integration of policies and also coherence across sectors to amplify the impact. We have seen a number of concrete solutions to combat deforestation through, for example, comprehensive strategies to involve the productive sectors, drivers of that deforestation, but also advancing towards renewable energy, raising awareness and engaging society, and also finding innovative ways to leverage finance for regional climate action. So it's we are really looking forward to listen to all of these examples that will be presented here today by the protagonists. And Regions4, we are really committed to continue to support regions and to catalyze on this leadership, and really want to welcome everybody to join us in these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. Natalia. Next, we have Mrs. Maria Jose Sanz, who is the director of the Basque Center for Climate Change, BC3. BC3, as you've heard from Natalia, has collaborated with Regions4 in the development and writing of the COP26 report. So for you, Mrs. Maria, in your opinion, and from Regions4 COP26 report, what are the key pillars of action that regional governments have put in place to increase their ambition, and what should be reinforced? Please, let's try and keep time. You have 3 minutes to respond so that we don't eat into the other session's time. 3 minutes, please. Mrs. Maria.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. And I would like to thank Regions4 for giving me the opportunity to share this time with you. What I would like to do is a reflection on some key issues that are fundamental now that we are putting adaptation very high in the agenda of climate change. I mean, adaptation is no longer the back of the climate change policy agenda. However, the pandemic in May is expected to affect the capacity to plan that it was accelerating before 2019. In particular, in vulnerable countries. IPCC recently, it told us that there is change already. We are experimenting climate change already. There is no way to avoid that. At the same time, we are also experimenting earlier than we couldn't predict ever extreme events all around the world, including from North America, Europe, China, so 360 degrees extreme events. Impact has been felt around the globe, showing more than ever before the need, more than even that before, the need to adapt to make societies more resilient. So this is a must. Adaptation is a must. Is the other side of the coin of mitigation. We cannot deal with mitigation without taking into account that we will be vulnerable to climate change. We can fail in mitigation de facto if we don't take into account adaptation. The Paris Agreement stated that we have to establish a global goal of adaptation. And now we are struggling to see what is the global goal of adaptation, because adaptation is something that happens locally. It's something that is very granular. So aggregated this up to the global goal is not something very simple to do. And it's very dangerous if we start thinking in terms of top-down adaptation global goal. We need to really make sure that this emanates from the bottom up, from the regions, from the local communities. The first step to set an ambition in the global goal on adaptation is to understand what increasing ambition adaptation means. We don't know yet what that means. But bottom up, as I said, is fundamental. Well, there may be not single answer to this. Science is providing us with some key issues that I want to reflect upon. So what we can do if we want to increase the ambition on adaptation? Well, first, we need to enhance the multi-level governance to drive coherent and effective climate action. Adaptation is undertaken by multiple actors across the horizontal and the vertical coordinates. And there are mechanisms that need to be seen at local, regional, national, and continental, and even global. Strengthening planning, implementing, and monitoring to increase the ambition is fundamental. Almost 80% of the countries have at least one national level adaptation planning instrument. So there's not only about national adaptation plans anymore. It's about local adaptation plans, it's about regional adaptation plans, it's about communities talking on adaptation and every single thing they do. The other challenge we have is how are we going to monitor this global adaptation goal? How are we going to monitor local adaptation, national adaptation, regional adaptation in a way that is coherent? We still have a long way to explore on that. Another key issue is mobilizing and localizing adaptation finance. We know very well about finance for mitigation. We've been talking about that for ages, but now we have to be very creative about how and which instruments we can mobilize for adaptation. It's not so easy to foresee how we are going to finance adaptation. The only thing we know is that the public finance is not going to be enough. We don't have enough. Governments do not have enough in their budgets to really confront adaptation. So we have to mobilize creative instruments from the private sector, from the communities themselves, and so on.
Excellent.
And finally,
Excellent.
it is
Yes.
extremely important that we don't make mistakes that, for example, we made in the past on mitigation. We need to mainstream adaptation into the other global agendas and also in the sectoral policies. It has to be cross-sectoral. In that regard, I think it's very important to remind that in the national agenda, we have the Paris Agreement, but we also have the Agenda for 2030 Sustainable Development Goals that we are all talking about. And we also have, for example, which is fundamental to adaptation, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. And all
Yes,
these
thank you
instruments
so
need to
much.
be
Thank you
planned
so
in a
much,
very
Mrs.
coherent,
Maria.
harmonized, and synergistic
Let's-
manner.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you
And
so
in doing
much.
so, I think the evidence suggests that it's fundamental that we will have a robust policy integration, which means enhanced coherence. So yeah. Okay, I mean, I'm just going to conclude in a very simple manner, saying to you that, again, let's do not forget that adaptation occurs across scales and impacts are often locally. So when we think globally, we need to make sure that there is an aggregation from the bottom up in an integrated manner and across sectors, across policies, and without taking into account all these global frameworks that we have now in our hands. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mrs. Maria Jose. Thank you so much, Natalia. So in the interest of time, we'll move swiftly to the next panel. I request the panelists to step down and the next panel to come up. We need to save a little bit in terms of time. So for the next panel, really, we are going to hear from different regional governments that are present in different contexts. This panel will look at their specific experience in tackling the challenges ahead and accelerating action. In this panel, who are coming on stage, we have Honorable Mr. Pere Aragonés, President of the Government of Catalonia, Honorable Mrs. Zuhal Demir, Minister of Justice and Enforcement, Environment, Energy and Tourism in the Government of Flanders, Honorable Mr. Javier Gallegos Barrientos, Regional Governor of Ica, Executive President of Mancomunidad Regional de Los Andes in Peru. Then Honorable Mr. David Spears, MP, Minister for Environment and Water, South Australia. Each speaker will try to keep really, really short and sweet. Let's keep it short and sweet at 5 minutes. And so for this panel, we are going to really discuss about how different regions have been able to raise ambitions for adaptation in their plans or climate resilience actions. So we'll start with Honorable Mr. Pere Aragonés. So how have you been able to raise ambitions of your adaptation plans, and what have been the driving force for raising this ambition? Mr. Perez, please.
So thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. Are you listening to me? Okay, thank you. So first of all, I want to thank Regions4 for the opportunity and for inviting me to be part of this panel. Let me introduce some figures about Catalonia. Catalonia, it's a nation with 7.5 million people. Our GDP is about 241 billion euros. Our capital, Barcelona, is now everywhere. So I want, doing this, having explained these figures, I want to be brief in order to fit the main issues. I want to highlight into the time slot assigned and to avoid repeating points mentioned previously by my colleagues. If I may, I will begin by highlighting the historical commitment by Catalan civil society for the preservation of the environment, a commitment that largely explains why the Catalan government was a pioneer in Spain in creating a ministry dedicated to the environment, who back in 1992 already participated in the Rio summit. This helps us understand why the Catalan government does not start from scratch. We've built a solid institutional structure on top of a layer of accumulated experience, which we must now use to accelerate change. In this sense, I would like to highlight the work done by the Advisory Council for Sustainable Development of Catalonia, created in 1998, or the Catalan Office of Climate Change, a first among sub-state actors, and one of which has provided important contributions, such as the Catalan Strategy for Adaptation to Climate Change. It is with this legacy that Catalonia, already at the COP21 held in Paris in 2015, promoted the Regions Adapt initiative. Our aim has always been to ensure that national and local governments show the international community that we play a decisive role in implementation of climate policies, that we can make our territories more resilient, but above all, that we can strengthen the multi-level and multi-actor collaboration in order to be more effective in the fight against climate change. In other words, we need to understand that the fight against climate change is a shared struggle. It involves all of us. We therefore need to strengthen the multi-level work and coordination to multiply the effectiveness of the measures that each of us takes in our respective countries. In recent years, Catalonia has not only strengthened its commitment in the struggle against climate change, it has done so by acting with full determination. Some examples. 2017, we passed an ambitious law against climate change, a first in Southern Europe. Among other issues, showed a clear commitment to green taxation and becoming carbon neutral by 2050. We must continue forging this path with new legislative tools such as the law on energy transition or the renewal of the Catalan strategy for adaptation to climate change. COP26 must do its utmost to reach commitments so that the average annual temperature of the planet does not exceed 1.5 degrees compared to the pre-industrial era. We need a full commitment for the international community to the planet and to life. This is what is at stake during this summit, the viability of Earth as a habitable planet. Allow me to put my country as an example. Today, the average temperature is 1.6 degrees higher than the pre-industrial era. Nights with temperatures over 25 degrees are common. This past summer, we've even had some nights over 30 degrees. The Catalan Pyrenees have no more glaciers, zero, none. They are extinct. And finally, I'd like to highlight the temperature of our seawater, which has risen an average of 0.32 degrees per decade. So our sea level, which rises 3.3 centimeters every 10 years. Through our way of life, we've caused climate change, global warming, and the current climate emergency. They are a direct result of our way of producing, distributing, and consuming. Therefore, on top of transforming our current energy model and mobility strategies, we must focus on the transformation of our production model. It's a change that requires a strategic vision, entrepreneurship, and extraordinary investments equivalent to the urgency we need to address. And here, without doubt, as Europeans, Catalonia has a unique opportunity with the European Union Next Generation funds. As an example, today we have announced grants for 115 million euros to help the self-supply photovoltaic installations in houses and in factories. The transformation of the productive model must be designed by taking into account the diversity of existing territorial needs in our countries. Too often, urban agenda and rural agenda have turned their backs on each other when faced with the needs brought about the climate change. We must ensure that we work together in order to be useful for the country as a whole. And I finish. It's urgent that we act and that we do so with all transformative ambition. So I hope my explanation, these examples have been useful for you, as has been useful for me, your examples to learn about your realities. Thank you so much. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Honorable Pere Aragonés. Next, we have Mrs. Zuhar, Honorable Mrs. Zuhal Demir, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mrs. President. Also, because of COVID within my cabinet, I cannot be in Glasgow. So many greetings from Flanders. Good afternoon, dear guests. Also, just like other places in the world, in Flanders, we already seeing the effects of climate change. One of the main problems in Flanders is the general focus on draining water away as quickly as possible to our rivers. But once there, it is lost to the sea. And as a result, Flanders is draining rainwater away in winter and pumping up groundwater in the summer. And on top of that, because of a combination of high population density, a lack of large rivers and high degree of pavement, our region is very vulnerable for droughts and water scarcity. And that's the reason why we made a plan, the Blue Deal, in July 2020 in our government, an ambitious plan to tackle these challenges. So what are we doing? First, we will stimulate infiltration by restoring wetlands to secure our water supplies. A lot of actions and infrastructure works are preparing Flanders for the future. A circular water use, for example, is a general principle. We want to reuse every drop of water in our homes, industry, farms, and together we are investigating in innovation in order to create a smarter, more sustainable water system. We also need to retain much more water. That's where nature becomes in. The role of nature is very big in these. In the past 50 years, Flanders has lost 75% of its wetlands. More nature and more place for water helps us to better store water and restore our groundwater levels. We will work with nature, so not against it, by creating new wetlands and letting our streams and rivers meander again. I have approved a lot of projects to restore swamps, wet grasslands, streams and buffer. And by doing this, we not only adapt to the effects of climate change, but we also create opportunities for biodiversity and a greener, healthier, and also more pleasant environment for our citizens. So it's a win-win also. Our Blue Deal exists of more than 70 measures with a budget of €500 million to achieve these goals. And I would say that regions have a big role to play in working on an ambitious adaptation. Flanders has joined Region 4 because we want to learn from other regions, share knowledges, technology and capacity. I would like to announce here that Flanders will also join Region Adapt to future stress in the importance of this issue and to continue also our collaboration. I hope our story of the Blue Deal, our big plan to tackle this big problem, can inspire some of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mrs. Zuhal, and thank you for keeping time. Next, we have Honorable Mr. Javier Gallegos Barrientos. Sorry for the mispronunciation. Please take over the stage.
Muy buenos días desde Perú. Les hago llegar el saludo del ingeniero Javier Gallegos Barrientos, gobernador regional de Ica y presidente de la Mancomunidad Regional de los Andes. Quien les habla, el biólogo Julio Aurelio Rojas Ñáñez, gerente regional de Recursos Naturales y Gestión del Medio Ambiente. Es un honor para mí participar en esta exposición sobre los problemas climatológicos dentro del ámbito territorial de la Mancomunidad Regional de los Andes en esta Convención sobre el Clima del 2021. En nuestra región Ica y en las regiones que conforman la Mancomunidad de los Andes se está llevando a cabo un proyecto muy importante para este proceso de adaptación, que es precisamente el proyecto de recuperación de los servicios ecosistémicos, de regulación hídrica de las microcuencas de Guaguas, Yauta, Laramate, Ocaña, San Pedro, Tepalco, Otoca, Leoncio Prado, Saiza, Santa Luisa y San Cristóbal, afluentes de Río Grande en Lucana, Sayacucho, el cual consiste en la recuperación de la capacidad de regulación hídrica en las microcuencas mencionadas. El gran problema que tenemos aquí es precisamente el problema de la falta de recursos hídricos. Se ha declarado en estado de emergencia en el 2018 en 4 regiones que conforman esta macrorregión. Y también en el 2019 se ha declarado en emergencia hídrica la provincia de Pisco, de aquí de la región Ica, donde se ha afectado no solamente los cultivos agrícolas, sino también el agua para consumo humano. Nos ha faltado agua para consumo humano. En ese sentido, se ha planteado dentro de este proyecto la construcción de reservorios de almacenamiento de recursos hídricos. Son reservorios de tierra compactada e impermeabilizada con geomembranas, ¿no?, de un material sintético, donde almacenamos agua para llevar adelante la instalación de plantones de vegetación dentro de un programa de forestación y reforestación, a fin de realizar regulación hídrica, almacenar también el recurso hídrico. En ese sentido, dentro de este proyecto de cobertura vegetal en la cabecera de cuencas, para luego efectuar el almacenamiento de aguas de lluvias en estos reservorios mencionados. Artificiales de tierra compactada, como ya lo mencioné. Se tiene como objetivo la reforestación de
Thank you so
1.000
much,
hectáreas
Honorable.
con 1.280.000 plantones
Thank you so
de
much,
pino
Honorable
y construir
Javier Gallegos.
35 reservorios.
We have to move to the next speaker, please. Thank you so
Hasta la
much.
actualidad ya se cuentan con 16 reservorios.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Honorable Mr. David Spears, and this is a recorded video. David Spears, please, let's play that video. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is David Spears and I have the great privilege of being South Australia's Minister for Environment and Water, the minister in our state who is responsible for climate change policy and climate change action. I wish I could be there at COP26 in Glasgow at the moment. I'm actually from Scotland, you might pick that up in my accent, but I've lived in Australia for nearly 20 years now. I can't be there because the international boundaries and the travel restrictions don't make that possible, but I do want to take this opportunity to share a little bit about South Australia's story, how we've adapted to the inevitably changing climate and how we've set ourselves up for what I believe is a vibrant, successful, exciting future. South Australia has got a very high level of livability, and that's something that we want to sustain into the future. In fact, Adelaide was recently named by The Economist as the most livable city in Australia and the 3rd most livable city in the world. And we are up to getting right up there to the most livable city in the world. We've got a tremendous lifestyle. Just check out what's going on behind me. But on the other side of the city, we've got beautiful hills, we've got vineyards, we've got really productive farming country. We've got offshore islands. 20% of our state is held within our national parks network. If you add that all together, it's about the size of the United Kingdom. And I have the privilege of getting to look after all of that. But one of the things that I am then challenged to do is maintain this livability, maintain Adelaide as this must-visit place. How do we do that? Well, we've got to think how we can build resilience into our landscape, into our city, into our neighbourhoods, into our streets in the face of a changing climate. What does that look like? Well, that means bold greening, it means cooling, it means dealing differently with the way we manage our water resources, it means building resilience into our coastline in as a natural way as possible. So I want to give you a quick case study about exactly what we're doing there with our coastline. We are working so hard to rebuild our beaches in a natural way. We've built a pipeline and we're building another one to reticulate sand round and round. Sand naturally drifts to the north in Adelaide, but that strips our beaches. We don't want trucks bringing sand back and forward, back and forward. We want to do that in a sensitive way. We want to rebuild those sand dunes, and that's what we've done just a couple of 100 meters along the coast from here. We want to get the plants into the sand dunes to create habitat so our shore nesting birds can have a chance of survival as well. So that's about coastal protection. Then if we go couple of hundred meters inland from here, we've got suburban streets. And we're getting warmer here in South Australia. We're having more days above 40 degrees. So we need to deal with that. Greener city streets, more street trees, more shrubs, more native grasses along our median strips and in the nature strips in front of our houses. We've set up Green Adelaide, a governance body with an expert board to help us boldly green our city. We want a greener, cooler, wilder city. We want to rewild it. We want native plants and animals as something that's just normal in our city streets. And so that's exactly what we're getting on and doing. So we're partnering with councils, we're providing them the funding to get more trees into the streets to cool our neighbourhoods. We're looking for better ways to manage our water resources, to try and make water more available, even though it is a scarce commodity, so that people feel comfortable planting gardens, cooling streets and front yards and backyards with trees. We're looking for ways to support green walls and green roofs. We've just actually announced a grant scheme to support people in the inner city part of our capital city of Adelaide to establish green walls and roofs and get big business owners, big building owners as well to get on board with that. We think that's really important to cool our city and to create habitat along the way. This transition will have lots of challenges. But as the state's minister responsible for this, I've got to rise to this challenge. I owe it to my peers, I owe it to future generations, I owe it to South Australians to build resilience, to make this city the best that it possibly can be. But we've got something far too precious in this city.
Can I request for the video
let,
to pause, please?
Drift away.
Control, thank you so much, thank you. Thank you for that message. And I want to thank the panelists, Honorables Perez, Zuhal, Javier, and David. We will now turn to the following speakers in this segment. We have Mr. Wilson Lechon, Environment Manager, Director, Congope. Please, he'll be speaking on behalf of Mr. Pablo Jurado Moreno, President of Congope, Provincial Prefect of Imbabura, Ecuador. Mr. Wilson, how did you collaborate across sectors and levels of government to develop and implement ambitious climate resilience actions? In 5 minutes, please, Mr. Wilson, summarize for us. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Susa. Reciba un cordial saludo desde Ecuador a nombre del Consorcio de Gobiernos Provinciales del Ecuador, Congope, una institución que asocia a las 23 provincias del Ecuador. Primero, quiero partir indicando que para nosotros el cambio climático a nivel local, a nivel provincial, es uno de los mayores desafíos que actualmente nos enfrentamos. Hemos evidenciado algunas problemáticas ya a nivel local, como la degradación de los ecosistemas, los efectos del cambio climático que ha provocado sequías, inundaciones, pérdidas humanas, incendios forestales. El Ecuador posee una gran diversidad de ecosistemas a nivel local, donde se sientan las poblaciones locales. Desde el Congope y desde los gobiernos provinciales hemos realizado algunas acciones y consideramos que son las pertinentes, y una de ellas es cómo el nivel provincial está aunando esfuerzos tanto con el nivel o el gobierno central y con los demás niveles de gobierno en un ámbito del gobierno intermedio, donde se está estableciendo políticas para que las políticas nacionales y las agendas internacionales se logren localizar a nivel territorial. Consideramos también, por otro punto, el marco o el contexto de la gobernanza multinivel. Desde el Congope nosotros estamos impulsando, por ejemplo, procesos de mancomunamiento entre los mismos niveles de gobierno o entre diferentes niveles de gobierno. Esto con el objetivo de establecer políticas, establecer estrategias locales de cambio climático, porque una de las problemáticas a nivel local en el Ecuador se ve que es la afectación a los modos de vida de la población local, a los modelos de vida. Y finalmente, en todo este contexto, lo que nosotros hemos establecido son herramientas hemos establecido políticas, hemos establecido estrategias a través de la construcción de las estrategias provinciales de cambio climático. Creo que para nosotros a nivel nacional es uno de los primeros esfuerzos y me atrevo también a mencionar que a nivel latinoamericano es uno de los ejemplos que hemos desarrollado en Ecuador en establecer un diagnóstico provincial, en conocer cuáles son los principales riesgos de cambio climático a nivel local. Con esto, lo que hemos establecido y estamos impulsando con al menos los 23 gobiernos provinciales es en generar políticas locales y generar acciones y establecer medidas tanto de adaptación y mitigación para combatir los efectos del cambio climático. Hacemos igual un llamado a todos los gobiernos subnacionales del mundo, en el contexto también latinoamericano, a que demuestren su voluntad política en apoyar a cumplir las metas del cambio climático, en apoyar a contribuir lo que cada uno de los países ha establecido en sus NDCs. Señalar también.
Yes, thank you so much, Wilson. Thank you, excellent. Thank you so much, Wilson. Thank you. Those are excellent remarks. We've learned a lot there. We will now turn to our last, but certainly not the least speaker in this segment. It is my pleasure to introduce Secretary Mr. Wade Crowfoot, California's Natural Resource Agency, California. You're the secretary there. Based on your experience in accelerating action on resilience and adaptation, what is your suggestion for scaling up adaptation and resilient actions at the speed that is required? Mr. Wade, please.
Well, thanks so much for the opportunity to talk. Some of us have been here for several days and we've heard so much information that I'll keep it really simple. We've run out of time to do anything but take urgent action to protect our people and nature from climate change. We know that as regional governments, I would argue even more so than our national governments. Why? Because our mayors, our governors, our ministers have to answer to the people whose lives and livelihoods are threatened by climate change. In California, we are proud of our climate action over the last 20 years. On the mitigation side, we're the 5th largest economy in the world, and we've actually managed to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions while greatly expanding our economy. But we didn't move quickly enough to advance climate adaptation, because we thought climate adaptation was almost like a future planning exercise, something that we would have to slowly but surely address for impacts that would come by the end of the century. Climate change has accelerated and those impacts are here now. Consider these facts. In California, 1 out of every 15 acres has burned in catastrophic wildfire in the last 2 years. Towns have been wiped off the map from these wildfires. And my 7-year-old daughter and millions of kids in California can't play outside for long periods of our wildfire season because of toxic smoke. This week, my agency in California will provide emergency water supplies to poor, isolated communities that have literally run out of water because of intensified groundwater pumping amidst the drought. And communities in California, like so many other places, suffer from extreme heat. We reached possibly a world record of heat in California, 130 degrees Fahrenheit or 54 centigrade, 54 centigrade. So many people in my position across the world could be sitting up here and talking about these impacts. Leaders from Andalusia, the autonomous region in Spain, or Jalisco, Mexico, talking about wildfire. States and provinces from South Africa and Australia talking about drought. Cities from Germany to Bangladesh talking about flooding. We understand these are urgent problems. So my suggestions, respectfully, to the regional effort within the UN is twofold. First is to make sure that we can share information at the right level, making sure that actually the information that's being provided is provided by the right people to the right people. The trick with resilience in my mind is it's so different. It's so localized. It is not a one size fits all, and strategies that work in one place might not work in the other place. So while it's important to have high level political leaders at an event like this, the more important piece is for us to strategize and to learn from each other in across our sectors. In California, we do have these sectoral action plans, these roadmaps, not planning activities, but what are we doing right now and what are we going to do? We're also trying to join them. So flooding, wildfire, drought are not siloed, with some key goals: protect the most vulnerable communities, be driven by science, and take action now, recognizing we'll spend a lot more money in lives on the back end. So I'm appreciative of being here, and I hope that all of us who represent regional governments can spread this message that action is needed now. And the most important thing that the United Nations can help us with is empowering each other to learn from one another around what actions we need to take. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Secretary Mr. Wade, for your insightful remarks and key takeaways. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to really turn to our concluding segment, and we'll hear the expectations from regional governments, what they are calling for at COP26, but also what they commit to do through the Race to Resilience campaign. I have the honor of inviting Honorable Mr. Rafael Cataneo, Regional Minister for Environment and Climate Change in the region of Lombardy. Mr. Cataneo, on 30th of September 2021, the region of Lombardy, with the government of Scotland and the support of Regions 4, organized a pre-COP event that gathered over 14 regions and defined a joint statement for the COP. Can I ask you kindly to share with us the main recommendations of this statement and what you'd like to share with national governments and the world during this COP?
Thank you, dear colleagues. Thank you, all of you. And first of all, let me say I really regret not to be there in person. I cannot be there due to family reasons, as I would be, but in any case, I assure the support of my regions of Lombardy in our common work. Yes, we met last 30th of September in Milan during the pre-COP, when the region of Lombardy, with the support of Regions 4 and the cooperation of the government of Scotland, organized the pre-COP event that gathered the panel discussion of 15 regions and defining the joint statement of regional governments for adaptation and mitigation for COP26. And let me say that we are also in time to take part of our statement until next Wednesday and to sign it. Of course, it is both an honor and a pleasure for my country and for my region to have hosted such important events in such crucial moment and critical situation that the world is living. But also, it's been important what we are doing as region. And I hope we will be able to increase the role of our regions and subnational government in this field. We are here today after a consolidated process of consultation of the statement and after a wide dissemination of the document to share it with all of us, with all the national governments and all the actors of COP26. In this statement, the regional governments call to enhance ambition, and accelerate actions. And we, the subnational government, recognize our key role in the forefront of the crisis and the need to accelerate action to both mitigate and adapt to climate change. We acknowledge that we are not on track with our target of 1.5 degrees, and we have to increase our ambition. So we ask 5 concrete points. First, reaching net zero emission. We must deliver net zero CO2 emission by 2050 and all emission by 2070, and see all countries publishing enhanced national determined contributions with supportive policies and pathway for delivery. Second, raising ambition on adaptation and resilience. The reviewed indices and current national adaptation plans must include joint, amplified, and measured ambitions for resilience and adaptation and reaching the most marginalized also to ensure the co-benefit of a wider and stronger social and economic cohesion. Third, driving systems change towards multi-level governance. National governments will only be able to reach their climate targets and ambition if regional and local actors bring in their full potential. And this is our task: raise our voice and be included in these increasing ambitions. Fourth, the regional institutional level can constitute the strategic hinge between the global worldwide actors and the local communities, as well as being promoter of a stricter cooperation between national, regional, and local level, sharing best practices and lessons learned by a wide set of multi-level actors. And five and last, mobilize finance for adaptation. Shifting the trillions needed to achieve the Paris Agreement is essential by providing credible targets and plans for developing capital to developing countries and at the regional and local level. International climate finance mechanisms, such as the Green Climate Fund, need to include regional level support and consider and push national governments to support regional governments to include within this mechanism funding at the local and regional level. So, concluding, regions also commit to the race to zero and race to resilience to drive the momentum toward accelerated action for climate resilience and adaptation. We thus encourage more regions to sign the statement, as I said before, and carry jointly the voice of regions and how to raise ambition on mitigation and adaptation to bring together the expertise and the best practices. We need more cooperation, not just to say one another what we are doing alone, but more cooperative actions among regions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Honorable Rafael. Next, I have the honor of inviting Honorable Mr. Eduardo Trani, Subsecretary of Environment of Sao Paulo in Brazil. So, Honorable Trani, can you tell us what has been the commitment of regions within race to resilience, and more specifically for Sao Paulo, what this means in terms of concrete commitment to the race?
First of all, I'd like to thank so much the occasion to be here, Mr. Axia. Thank you for the invitation. On behalf of the governor of São Paulo, Mr. João Doria, who was leading our committee here in COP these days, I'd say that it's so important to talk about resilience in name all of the states of Brazil. Brazil, that's a huge nation, and the state of São Paulo, 45 million inhabitants. But I like to say that it is always good to remember that in addition to reduction emissions, the Paris Agreement established a global adaptation goal to aims to increase climate resilience and reduce vulnerability to climate impacts. And in Brazil now, the 27 states started to have a more prominent role. And now in this COP, we have the 10 states of Brazil here looking for mitigation and adaptation agenda. And it's due to the very important participation of the São Paulo since the beginning with the Regions 4 in 2015. It's due to our company that we did São Paulo to join the Race to Resilience campaign. I remember when Gonzalo that talked to us today, he made a conference with us and he said, we need to put people on resilience agenda. And São Paulo and Brazil, the resilience agenda is the main importance for this agenda of climate change. Why? Because our countries and our people, as my colleague was saying about, I agree completely with the Californian colleague that just talked right now, and it's very important because you have a great depth to include the most vulnerables. When we talk about resilience, we're talking about the people, 220 million inhabitants in Brazil, 45 million in São Paulo, but most of them, 90% of them, they are who suffers the most, the consequence and the effects of global warming. And for them, the only issue is a congregation between the state and private sector to make policies due to change the situation. That's why the agenda of resilience, and that's the role so important of Regions 4 and Region Adapt projects. And with you, I'm very glad to say, as my question was done, that my relevant sectors we're working for water scarcity and water security. That's a main question in all our countries. Ecosystem-based adaptation projects, including agriculture and reforestation. That's a great wish we have to do. Also, the provision of disaster and risk area programs is exactly the most vulnerable who suffers this consequence, and the combat to forest fires, to say just some projects. And what we're doing now, what's the difference we're making now with the help with the Regions 4, we're making our program that the Resilient State Climate Change, that's called Municipalities Resilience. It's a new program called Refloresta, a big reforestation, which includes the ambition of 1 million hectares in our state of native vegetation to be restored. That means 2.5 billion trees. I think it's the most biggest one commitment in Brazil now for reforestation our government bring to the COP. And also good examples, multiply governance project. And I'd like to share with my friends, Jussara Carvalho, who is just the beginning, Fernanda Perizon, who succeed a program of capacity building with the municipalities. I think the role of the states is to put down to the municipalities, to call the people to join us to this great challenge that's adaptation agenda. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eduardo. Thank you so much. Now I give back the floor to Honorable Mrs. Aratzia Tapia, Regions 4 President, for concluding remarks. Mrs. Aratzia.
Okay, let me say you some words as final remarks and go back to the statement of regional governments presented here today to say that it is a collective message to the parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and a reiteration of the demand for greater collaboration, inclusion, recognition, and multi-level governance. The territories we represent are those who suffer the impacts of climate change on the front line, as it was being said before. However, our communities are and will be resilient because we bring concrete proposals, innovative solutions, and coordinated work with all sectors of society and all levels of government. Our aspirations for COP26 are backed by the proposals and ambitions we have heard today, and we are trying to implement, not we have only heard, we are implementing. They are also supported by the commitments made by Regions Adapt member governments, as well as signatories of the Race to Zero and Race to Resilient campaigns. We commit to setting ambitious emission reduction targets to 2030 and go further in 2050 to achieve climate neutrality. We commit to planning more and better the adaptation of our territories and measuring the impact of our actions to contribute to the resilience of more than 4 billion people by 2030. We commit to working collaboratively, fostering multi-level governance and international cooperation through partnerships such as Regions 4. We commit to working in solidarity to ensure that mobilization of finance reaches those regions which are those with least resources. So COP26 is a milestone in the long distance race that we are undertaking nowadays. And we must continue to work to make the commitments that come out of the summit of this year to reality, with concrete results in short term and real impact. I invite all regional governments, associations of governors, governments, and international associations to join Regions 4's collective advocacy and cooperative efforts so that together we can create a stronger community that continues to lead climate action for a healthy planet. This is our main issue, the key issue we have to tackle for the next years. So thank you very much for being here today with us.
Oh, sorry. It looks like I was speaking to myself there. I was muted. So thank you so much, Honorable Mrs. Arancia Tapia, Regions 4 President, for your concluding remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of a fantastic session, and I'd like to really thank the speakers for the wealth of interventions and very inspiring contributions. Today, we have seen how regional governments are drivers of the necessary transformation to reach our shared climate goals. Some regional governments are also finding tailored ways to leverage finance for regional climate action, which is key to accelerating action. Regional governments will continue to share, regions are calling for multi-level governance and radical collaboration and adhering to broader efforts such as UNFCCC, Race to Zero, and Race to Resilience. I'm reminded that at least 76 regions have already joined these races so far. Regional governments will continue to share these key messages for the rest of the COP through the Marrakesh Partnership and the LGMA constituency, and notably during the Marrakesh Partnership Action Day on the 11th of November, as you heard from Gonzalo Munoz. Please, we implore you to read and share the statement of Regions for COP26, which can be found on Regions 4 COP26 website, and add your logos and endorsements. The statement will be open for endorsements until the Wednesday of 10th of November, and you can send to the address on this slide. I think there's a slide that is being shown. Please be able to share your endorsements there. Thank you once again for distinguished panelists. We look forward to continue to engage with you all to strengthen the voice of regions through the Race to Resilience campaign and beyond, and work together for more sustainable, inclusive, and climate resilient future. I will end here by saying that this event is followed by the Adaptation Lab event on the Multi-Level Action Pavilion at 4 p.m. GMT today, which is organized by Climate KIC, Scotland, and California, with the support of Regions 4, and we invite all participants to attend this event. We ask that for you who are in the room, that you please endorse the statement for Regions for COP26, and all partners to come on stage for a last picture. I think for some of us who are online, we can only wish that we are there, but I think you'll be directed to the stage to be able to take a picture. Thank you so much again for such an exciting and inspiring event. Until soon, bye-bye.
COP26 is a critical turning point if the world wants to secure a future where people and planet can thrive together. Local and regional governments are proving to be ready to meet the challenge, and Regions 4 will continue to catalyze this leadership and ambition for a sustainable, inclusive, and climate-resilient future.